Stop it. Please. You're breaking his arm. Grace's terrified scream echoed through the mansion as the stepmother dragged baby Michael like a rag doll. His cries were turning faint, almost lifeless. But the real nightmare began the moment billionaire Alexander stepped inside and froze, watching the woman he trusted torture his only child. Why would she do this? What was she hiding? And how far had her plan already gone? Before we begin, tell me one thing. Where are you watching this video right now? And what time is it in your city? Now take a deep breath, adjust your volume, to uncover the secrets buried in this mansion. Don't miss a single second of this story. The marble foyer of the Drake mansion gleamed under the afternoon sun, but inside its walls lived a darkness no one from the outside could ever imagine. Grace, the housemaid, had seen small flashes of that darkness before. Sharp words, cold stares, unexplained bruises on baby Michael's arms. But nothing prepared her for the moment she walked into the foyer and saw Cassandra dragging the 14-month-old boy across the floor like a sack of grain. Michael wasn't crying the normal way a hungry baby cries. He was screaming the kind of scream that tears through the air, that makes the soul recognize danger before the mind understands it. His tiny left arm was twisted unnaturally behind him, shoulder popping and grinding as Cassandra yanked him forward. "Please stop, madam. Please, you're hurting him." Grace's voice cracked as she ran forward. Cassandra didn't even look at her. Her designer heels clicked sharply against the marble as she dragged the child with chilling indifference. "Stay out of this, Grace." Cassandra's voice was flat, almost bored. If he didn't make everything so difficult, this wouldn't happen. Grace reached for Michael, her heart pounding, but Cassandra's heel slammed into her stomach, sending her crashing backwards. "Touch him again," Cassandra hissed, "and I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Michael's tiny face had turned mottled red and purple. His screams had weakened into hoarse gasps. His body shook violently as shock began to settle in. Grace crawled forward anyway. "Madam, please. His arm. His arm is broken." "Shut up." Cassandra yanked him again. "He'll survive." And then the front door opened. Alexander Drake stepped inside, still in his suit, briefcase in his hand, home 3 days early from an unplanned cancellation of his Singapore trip. The moment he heard his son scream, he froze. That wasn't just crying. That was agony. The briefcase fell from his hand with a loud thud. "What the hell is happening here?" Cassandra jerked backward in shock, dropping Michael. The baby collapsed on the floor, whimpering, his arm dangling at a sickening angle. Grace immediately scooped him up, shielding his body with her own. "Sir." "His shoulder." She was dragging him. Cassandra spoke over her, voice trembling with perfectly rehearsed panic. "Alexander, thank God you're home." He almost fell down the stairs. I grabbed him to stop him. His arm must have twisted. I was trying to save him. Her eyes shone with fake tears. Her voice shook with fake fear. Her hands touched her chest in fake shock. But Alexander wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on Grace. Grace, shaking, pale, clutching the baby protectively. Grace, who had worked for his family for 2 years. Grace, who had never once raised her voice, never once caused trouble. And she looked terrified. "Grace," Alexander said quietly. "What happened?" Grace swallowed hard. Her lips trembled. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Sir." She dragged him by his arm. He was screaming. She wouldn't stop. "She's lying," Cassandra snapped. "This maid has been careless for weeks. She probably dropped him herself, and now she's trying to cover it up." Alexander stepped closer. Grace flinched instinctively. That was when he knew. Something in him snapped. "Give me my son," he said. Calm. Too calm. Grace placed Michael into his arms. The moment the baby was against his father's chest, he began to cry. A weak, broken, pain-filled cry. Alexander felt the unnatural looseness in the boy's shoulder, the lack of resistance, the way his little hand hung limp. He looked up at Cassandra. "We're going to the hospital." Cassandra's mask slipped for a moment. Just a flash. Cold. Calculating. Angry. "Alexander, don't be dramatic," she tried. "Kids are resilient. We'll put some ice. We're going. Now." He turned to Grace. "Come with us." Cassandra stepped in front of Grace. "She stays here." Alexander's jaw clenched. "She comes with me." Grace didn't wait. She ran. Within seconds, she was in the back seat of the Mercedes, holding a towel under Michael's arm to keep it from moving. Alexander started the car. Cassandra stormed down the steps after them. "Alexander, you're overreacting. You're making this into an official incident for no reason." The phrase hit him. Official incident. Why would she be afraid of that? He sped off. At the hospital, nurses took one look at Michael and immediately rushed him into the pediatric trauma room. Grace stood in the corner, trembling, hands clenched together. A doctor approached Alexander after examining the baby. "Mr. Drake, his shoulder is dislocated. Severely. This kind of injury in a toddler requires significant force. We are required to report this as suspected child abuse." Grace's breath hitched. Alexander's world spun. "Doctor, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," the doctor said gently, "this was not caused by catching a falling toddler. This was caused by violent yanking." Alexander slowly turned toward Grace. "Grace, tell me everything you know." Her eyes filled with tears, and then it came out. The late-night crying. The bruises she wasn't allowed to mention. The threats Cassandra whispered when Alexander traveled. The times Michael wasn't fed. The times Grace tried to intervene. The warnings she received. The fear she lived with every single day. And finally, "Sir, I tried. I really tried to protect him. But she said she'd have me fired, deported, ruined if I ever told you. I was scared. I'm so sorry." Alexander's hand tightened around the armrest. "Grace," he whispered, "I'm the one who's sorry. I should have seen. I should have listened." Grace covered her face and sobbed. And Alexander knew. Nothing in his life would ever be the same after this night. Grace sat in the corner of the hospital room, her apron rumpled, her hands trembling as she watched doctors gently place Michael's tiny arm into position. The baby's screams cut through the air, each cry slicing into her chest like a blade. Alexander stood beside the medical table, holding Michael's free hand while the doctor reduced the shoulder. His jaw was tight, eyes burning with guilt and fury. When the joint finally snapped back into place with a sickening pop, Michael's cry turned into an exhausted whimper. He collapsed against Alexander's chest, clutching his father's shirt with his good arm. Alexander pressed his cheek against Michael's forehead and closed his eyes. "Daddy's here," he whispered. "I'm here. I promise I won't let anyone hurt you again." Grace looked away, her heart twisting. She had never seen him so broken. A soft knock interrupted the moment. A woman entered, middle-aged, professional, gentle eyes behind thin glasses. "Mr. Drake?" She introduced herself. "I'm Patricia. I'm the social worker assigned to this case." Alexander straightened. Grace froze. Patricia's voice was calm but firm. "I'm required to speak with you, and with your household employee, about what happened in your home." Grace's breath caught. Household employee. That meant her. Alexander nodded. "Ask me anything." Patricia began with basic questions: who lived in the home, who cared for the child during the day, any previous injuries, behavioral issues, doctor visits. Alexander answered honestly. Then Patricia turned to Grace. Her voice softened. "Grace, I need you to tell me what you've seen." Grace swallowed, hands tightening into fists. Her eyes flicked nervously to Alexander, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. And so she told the truth. Not the sanitized truth. Not the careful hints she'd used before. The real truth. How Cassandra screamed at Michael for crying too loudly. How she forced Grace to withhold food as discipline. How she shook the baby during tantrums. How she grabbed him by the arm whenever he reached for anything. How she locked Grace in her room on days she dared question the stepmother. How she threatened to ruin her life if she spoke. And finally, "Sir, I was so scared she'd hurt him worse if I disobeyed. She said she'd call immigration and have me deported. She said no one would believe a maid." Patricia's expression darkened. Alexander's hand curled into a fist. But Grace wasn't done. There were bruises. Many. Her voice cracked. "I should have told someone sooner. I tried once to tell him." She looked at Alexander again, eyes filling. "But Cassandra told me if I ever told you anything, she'd make Michael disappear. She said accidents happen all the time. Babies fall. Babies drown. Babies stop breathing. And no one would question her." Alexander felt sick. Patricia exhaled and closed her notebook. "Mr. Drake," she said gently, "your employee has formally disclosed a pattern of severe ongoing abuse. I need to issue an emergency protective order. Cassandra Drake cannot be near this child and must be removed from the home immediately." Grace looked stunned. Alexander looked relieved and devastated at the same time. "What happens now?" he asked. "Tonight, you and the child and Ms. Grace must stay somewhere safe. We'll continue interviewing and collecting evidence tomorrow morning. Police will be involved." Grace blinked. "Me? Stay with you?" Alexander hesitated only a moment before saying, "Yes, she's safer with us." They checked into a nearby hotel. Alexander carrying Michael, Grace trailing behind silently. The suite felt foreign and too quiet, like a world paused mid-breath. Michael finally fell asleep in the crib provided by the hotel staff. Grace stood near the window, rubbing her hands anxiously. Alexander approached her slowly. "Grace," he said, "what you did today, you saved my son's life." Her eyes lowered to the carpet. "I wish I could have stopped her sooner." "You tried." His voice softened. "I failed him, not you." Grace shook her head. "You didn't know." "But I should have known," he whispered. "I trusted her. I left him with her. I left you alone with her." Grace finally looked at him. "Sir." She fooled everyone, even me at first. He gave a hollow smile. "Doesn't make it easier." A knock sounded at the door. When Alexander opened it, two detectives entered, Harrison and Cole. Serious, stern, businesslike. "Mr. Drake, Ms. Grace, we need to take full statements." Grace stiffened. Detective Harrison sat across from her. "Ms. Grace," he said, "tell us what you know." "Everything." Grace looked at her hands, and then she spoke. For nearly an hour, she recounted details she wished she could forget. Alexander watched, horrified, as the detectives wrote down every word. When she finished, Harrison nodded. "Ms. Grace, you're incredibly brave." Grace didn't feel brave. She felt exhausted, broken, shaking, and unbelievably relieved. Then Harrison turned to Alexander. "We executed a preliminary warrant on your home. We found sedatives in Cassandra's bathroom, doses consistent with what your son likely ingested." Alexander's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, sedatives?" Michael's irritability, fatigue, his sleepiness, likely induced. "And Ms. Grace," Harrison looked at her, "your account matches the medication timetable we found." Alexander leaned forward. "Is he going to be okay?" "We'll test him in the morning. If doses were small, there shouldn't be long-term damage." Grace covered her mouth in horror. Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder. She flinched and used a gentle touch, but didn't pull away. Harrison closed his notebook. "Mr. Drake, Ms. Grace, Cassandra will be arrested by morning." Grace's knees buckled. Alexander caught her before she fell. "It's over," he whispered. "She can't hurt him or you again." But the night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Outside, a storm began to rumble. And inside the hotel room, Grace kept staring at the door, half expecting Cassandra's silhouette to appear at any moment. Thunder cracked outside the hotel windows, rattling the glass. Grace jolted each time the sky lit up, nerves frayed to threads. Alexander finally got Michael to sleep in the portable crib, his tiny chest rising and falling with soft, uneven breaths. The detectives had left hours ago, but the weight of their words still hung in the air like smoke. Cassandra would be arrested by morning. She would face charges. She would be kept away from Michael. Yet Grace couldn't shake the feeling of dread tightening around her throat. People like Cassandra didn't break down. They struck back. Alexander paced the room, phone in hand, scanning emails and documents as he dug into things he should have investigated years earlier. Grace stood silently, hands clasped in front of her, watching him with a growing ache in her chest. "Sir," she said softly, "you need to rest." He didn't look up. "I can't. Not until I understand how deep this goes." Grace hesitated. "Sir, I don't think knowing everything tonight will change anything." Finally, Alexander stopped moving. He looked at her, really looked at her, her tired eyes, her shaking hands, the bruise blooming on her ribs from Cassandra's kick, the years of fear hiding behind her calm posture. "You've been living in hell," he whispered, "and I didn't see it." Grace opened her mouth to reassure him, but the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't lie to him anymore, not after everything. "You trusted her," she said softly. "You believed your family was safe. That's not a crime." Alexander sank onto the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. "She told me you were unreliable," he murmured. "That you were dramatic, that you made mistakes." Grace's face flushed, humiliation mixed with anger. She blamed me for everything," Grace whispered. "When Michael cried too much, when dinner was late, when a vase broke. Even if I wasn't near it, she said it was my fault." Alexander's jaw tightened. "She made you her shield," he said slowly. "Her scapegoat." Grace nodded miserably. Alexander exhaled deeply. Then, without warning, his phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed a name that drained the color from his face. "Cassandra." Grace's breath hitched. "Don't answer," she whispered. "She'll twist whatever you say." Alexander stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Seconds later, a text popped up. Then another. Then 10 more. Grace braced herself as Alexander read them aloud in disbelief. "Why did you take my baby? You're ruining everything. That maid is lying. She's jealous. She wants to replace me. Come home now. I can explain. If you destroy my life, I'll destroy yours." Grace's stomach twisted. "Sir, we shouldn't stay here," she whispered. "She's unpredictable." Alexander nodded, already aware. "We won't. As soon as the police arrest her, we'll leave the city for a few days." Grace's shoulders sagged in relief. But the relief didn't last long. A sharp knock echoed through the room. Grace jumped violently. Alexander instinctively shielded her with his arm as he approached the door. "Who is it?" he demanded. "It's Patricia. Open the door, please." Alexander exhaled shakily and opened it. The social worker entered, face pale. "Mr. Drake." "Grace, I came as soon as I heard." Alexander frowned. "Heard what?" Patricia's voice lowered. "Cassandra fled." Grace felt the blood drain from her face. What do you mean fled?" she whispered. "She used a fake passport. She withdrew money from an offshore account. Police missed her by minutes. We believe she's trying to leave the country." Grace's knees weakened. She gripped the back of the sofa. Alexander's voice hardened. "How long until they find her?" "Airport units are searching. Border agents too. But she may have help. Someone inside your circle." Alexander's eyes narrowed. Help from who? Patricia hesitated. Your CFO, Martin Pierce. He's missing too. Grace's breath caught. Oh no. Martin was close to Cassandra. Too close. She had seen them whispering behind closed doors, always stopping when she passed by. She had sensed something wrong but never understood the depth. Alexander pressed his fingers to his temples. Tell me everything, Patricia explained. Martin helped Cassandra forge Alexander's signatures. He helped transfer millions into overseas accounts. He likely helped plan her escape. And he might be helping her avoid the authorities right now. Grace felt the room spin. Cassandra was out there, angry, cornered, dangerous, and Grace had spoken against her. Sir, her voice broke. She knows I told you. She knows I'm with you. Alexander turned sharply toward her. You're safe here. No, Grace whispered, tears filling her eyes. She said once she'd make me disappear. She said maids go missing all the time and no one cares. Alexander crossed the room in 2 quick steps. He placed his hands gently on her shoulders, a careful, protective gesture. Grace, listen to me. I swear on my life, nothing will happen to you or Michael. I won't let it. Grace sucked in a shaky breath. She didn't know if she believed in promises anymore. But his voice felt steady. Safe. The first real safety she'd felt in months. 2 hours later, Michael was asleep again, and the hotel room had finally quieted. Alexander stepped out onto the balcony to take a call from Detective Harrison. Grace watched from inside through the glass. He looked exhausted. He looked angry. He looked like a man who had been betrayed in the most horrifying way. When he came back inside, his expression was grave. They found something at the house, he said quietly. Grace stiffened. What? Evidence Cassandra was planning something far worse than abuse. Diaries, calculations, notes. Grace covered her mouth. She wasn't just hurting him, Alexander whispered. She had a plan, a long-term plan. Grace's throat tightened. What kind of plan? Alexander's voice cracked. To get rid of both of you. Grace collapsed into a chair, trembling uncontrollably. She had sensed it, felt it, feared it, but hearing it confirmed shattered something inside her. Alexander knelt beside her. It's over, he repeated, voice fierce. She'll be caught. She'll go to prison. She'll never touch either of you again. But even as he said it, both of them knew one terrifying truth. A cornered monster is twice as dangerous. Morning arrived with police sirens. Alexander barely slept. Grace didn't sleep at all. Every sound in the hallway made her jump. Every vibration of the phone made her heart pound. Every shadow behind the curtains made her afraid Cassandra had finally found them. But when Detective Harrison arrived at the hotel suite, his face carried both relief and urgency. Mr. Drake, Grace, he said, entering quickly. We located Cassandra. Grace felt her entire body tense. Where? Alexander asked. At the international terminal. She tried boarding a private jet with a forged passport and $200,000 in cash. Grace exhaled sharply, gripping the table for support. She wanted to collapse in relief, but something in Harrison's tone warned her not to. She resisted arrest, he continued, fought with airport officers, screamed your names, said she'd finish what she started. Grace's blood ran cold. Alexander's jaw tightened. She's in custody now, Harrison said. But, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Martin Pierce is still missing. Grace's relief vanished instantly. Alexander stood straighter. Where is he? We think he went to ground, Harrison said. He panicked after Cassandra was caught. He has money hidden, contacts. He's scared and dangerous. Grace swallowed hard. Does he know where we are? He hasn't used his phone or cards, Harrison replied. But given his involvement with Cassandra, we assume he could try something. Alexander stepped in front of Grace instinctively. "What are you doing about it?" he demanded. "We've assigned patrol units to follow you," Harrison said. "But I strongly advise you leave this hotel. Move somewhere Martin cannot track." Alexander didn't hesitate. "We'll go to my sister Julia's house. Martin's never met her. Never heard me mention her." Grace nodded quickly, grateful for anything that felt safe. Harrison gave final instructions, then left. Within minutes, Alexander was packing Michael's diaper bag, bottle, formula, blanket, everything they needed. Grace folded her apron slowly. The fabric felt heavier than ever. Before leaving, she stopped beside Michael's crib. She brushed her fingers gently across his hair. "You're safe now," she murmured. At least, she hoped he was. They loaded into the Mercedes, Grace sitting in the back with Michael as Alexander drove toward the highway. 2 unmarked police cars followed behind them. "Grace," Alexander said softly through the rearview mirror, "you don't have to be scared. Cassandra is gone." "I'm not scared of her anymore," Grace whispered. "I'm scared of the people helping her." They drove for 30 minutes, then 40. The highway stretched long and empty. The police cars remained close behind. Michael fell asleep in Grace's arms, tiny breaths tickling her collarbone. For the first time since yesterday, she felt a sliver of calm, until Alexander's voice hardened. "Grace, don't react suddenly, but I need you to look behind us." Grace turned slowly. Her lungs caved inward. A black SUV followed them at a calculated distance. Not speeding, not swerving, just lurking. "Is that one of the police cars?" Grace whispered. "No," Alexander said tightly. "That's Martin." Grace's heart plummeted. "Oh God!" Alexander's voice sharpened. "I need you to get down. Hold Michael and stay flat on the floor." Grace didn't question. She slid off the seat, clutching Michael to her chest as she curled around him protectively. Alexander dialed 911, voice tense but controlled. "This is Alexander Drake. I'm being followed by a black SUV on Highway 47. This Martin Pierce. He's dangerous. My child and Maid are with me." The operator's voice was calm. "Units are 2 minutes out. Keep driving. Don't stop." 2 minutes. But Martin was done waiting. The SUV sped up suddenly, swerving hard into the Mercedes' rear bumper. Grace screamed as the car jolted violently. Michael wailed. Alexander gripped the wheel. "Stay down," he shouted. Martin rammed them again. Grace pressed Michael's head against her chest to shield him as tears streamed down her face. Alexander accelerated, but Martin matched him, inches behind. Then Martin swerved, hard, into their side. The Mercedes skidded, tires screeching, fishtailing dangerously close to the guardrail. Alexander wrestled the wheel, jaw clenched, sweat rolling down his temples. "Just hold on. Please hold on." Grace clung to the baby. Her entire body shook, but she didn't loosen her grip for a moment. Another impact, then another. Martin was trying to spin them out, to flip the car, to kill them. Michael's terrified cries pierced the chaos. Grace's heart shattered. Then, sirens. Blessed, beautiful sirens. Red and blue lights flashed behind them as 3 police cruisers appeared from the next exit. Martin tried to accelerate, but officers boxed him in, forcing his SUV toward the shoulder. Alexander kept driving until the flashing lights faded behind them. Finally, he pulled over. He jumped out, ran to the back door, and threw it open. Grace was curled on the floor, shaking violently, arms wrapped around Michael like a shield. "Grace," he said, dropping to his knees. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" She couldn't speak. She just sobbed deep, broken sobs that came from weeks of holding everything in. Alexander lifted her gently out of the car, still holding Michael. He wrapped them both in his arms. "You're safe. It's over. He can't hurt you." Grace buried her face against his shoulder, crying harder. I thought Her voice cracked. I thought he was going to kill us. Alexander held her tighter. I won't let anything happen to you, he whispered. Not to my son. Not to you. Not ever. Police approached. Martin's in custody, one officer said. He'll be charged with attempted murder. Alexander nodded without letting go of Grace. Michael clung to both of them. And for the first time, Alexander realized Grace wasn't just the maid. She was the reason his son was alive. The reason the truth came out. The reason they survived today. He owed her more than he could ever repay. They reached Julia's home an hour later. A quiet suburb, tall fences, locked gates, peaceful. Alexander carried Michael inside while Julia embraced Grace warmly. You're safe here, Julia said. Both of you. Grace nodded weakly, exhausted beyond words. That night, after Michael was settled and the house grew quiet, Alexander stepped onto the porch where Grace sat alone, staring at the stars. He sat beside her. You saved my child, he said quietly. My whole world. I will never forget that. Grace stared straight ahead, eyes moist. I didn't save him alone, she whispered. You did, Alexander insisted gently. You were his protector when I wasn't. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Alexander glanced at the house door, making sure no one was listening. Tomorrow, he said, Cassandra will face the judge. And Grace, I need you with me, not as a maid, as the person who saw everything, as the person who stood up when I didn't. Grace turned to him. Her voice trembled. I'll be there, sir. But beneath her calm tone, she felt one truth. Tomorrow she would face the woman who nearly destroyed her. And finally, Grace wouldn't face her alone. Morning in Julia's home was quiet. Too quiet for what the day held. Grace dressed slowly, her hands trembling as she buttoned her blouse. She kept seeing Cassandra's face in flashes. The cold smile, the raised hand, the threats, the promises of ruin. Part of her still expected Cassandra to walk into the room at any moment. But this time, she wouldn't be the one who had to hide. Alexander knocked softly on the guest room door. Grace. His voice was gentle. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Grace stepped out. She looked pale but composed. Determined. Alexander gave a small, reassuring nod. We'll get through this. Together. The courthouse was a circus. Reporters lined the steps, shouting questions. Cameras flashed. News vans blocked traffic. Mr. Drake, is it true Cassandra abused your son? Who is the woman with you? Is she the maid? Grace, did you witness the assaults? Security escorted them through the chaos. Grace held Michael close, his head on her shoulder. He was too young to understand, but her tight grip told him everything he needed to know. He clung to her with little fingers curled into her blouse. Inside, the courtroom felt colder, heavier. Cassandra was already seated at the defense table, hands cuffed, wearing an orange jumpsuit that stripped her of elegance and illusion alike. When she lifted her eyes and saw Alexander, her expression flickered with hatred. When she saw Grace holding Michael, that hatred sharpened like a blade. Grace felt the weight of that stare crawl up her spine, but she didn't look away. Judge Morrison entered. Court was in session. The charges were read aloud one by one. Child abuse, endangerment, assault, use of sedatives on a minor, conspiracy, attempted murder. Cassandra's attorney rose, a slick man in a dark suit. Your Honor, he began. My client maintains her innocence. These stories are exaggerated, manufactured by a jealous maid with a personal vendetta. Rebecca Chun, Alexander's attorney, stood sharply. Objection, Your Honor. The maid he's referring to is the woman who risked her safety to save a child's life. We have medical documentation. We have video from the foyer. We have diaries. We have evidence of drugging. We have financial records. We have statements from the defendant's own co-conspirator. Grace held her breath. Julia squeezed her hand gently. Judge Morrison peered over her glasses. Enough. Proceed with the evidence. Rebecca called the first witness, Detective Harrison. He spoke calmly, professionally, detailing the injuries, the timelines, the sedatives, the financial crimes. Then he mentioned something that made Grace's stomach twist. Upon searching the defendant's office, we found detailed plans for eliminating both the child and Miss Grace. Grace froze. The courtroom murmured. Cassandra's lawyer paled. Grace felt Michael shift against her, nuzzling closer as if sensing her fear. Alexander rested his hand over hers. I won't let anything happen to you, he whispered. She believed him. For the first time, she truly believed someone. Then came the moment Grace dreaded. Your Honor, Rebecca announced. I'd like to call Ms. Grace to the stand. Grace felt her knees weaken. Her voice caught. Alexander stood. You don't have to do this alone. Grace swallowed hard. I know. She handed Michael to Julia, smoothed her blouse, and walked to the witness stand. The courtroom seemed enormous. Every eye on her, every whisper echoing. The clerk swore her in. Grace's voice trembled as she began. I'm Grace Flores. I worked for the Drake family for 2 years. Rebecca guided her gently. Grace, tell the court what you witnessed. Grace told them everything. The dragging, the screaming, the threats, the starvation, the locked doors, the bruises, the nights she stayed awake listening to Michael cry because she was forbidden to comfort him. Tears ran down her cheeks. I tried to protect him, she whispered. I tried every day, but she said she'd ruin my life if I told anyone. She said maids disappear and no one notices. She wiped her face. But I noticed. I noticed him hurting. I noticed him fading. And I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Rebecca let silence fill the room, just for a moment. Then asked the question that mattered most. Grace, do you believe Cassandra intended to kill the child? Grace's stomach twisted, but she answered with truth. Yes, if Alexander hadn't come home early, I don't think Michael would be alive. Cassandra screamed across the courtroom. Liar! Filthy little liar! You're trying to steal my life. The guards restrained her as Judge Morrison slammed her gavel. Mrs. Drake, sit down. But Grace didn't flinch this time. She had survived Cassandra. She feared nothing now. After closing arguments, the judge returned with the verdict. Given the overwhelming evidence, the defendant is sentenced to life in prison, with no contact allowed with the child or with Ms. Grace. She will be transferred to state custody immediately. Cassandra's face twisted into something inhuman, rage and disbelief melting into a broken scream. You will regret this, Alexander. Both of you. Guards dragged her away. And just like that, the nightmare ended. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Rebecca shielded them. Alexander stepped close to Grace, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You were extraordinary, he said. You saved him, and you saved yourself. Grace felt her throat tighten. I was just doing what anyone would do. No, Alexander said softly. Not anyone. Some people look away. You didn't. You fought for him, even when it meant risking everything. Julia stepped beside them, handing Michael back to Grace. Michael instantly curled into her, tiny hands gripping her collar. Alexander watched the scene with something tender in his eyes. Grace, he said quietly, you are family, whether you realize it or not. Grace's breath hitched. Family, a word she had never belonged to. Not until now. The following months brought healing. Michael grew stronger, laughing more, sleeping safely, no longer terrified of footsteps or sudden noises. Grace attended therapy with Alexander and Michael. She learned her fear wasn't weakness. Her courage had simply been stretched beyond breaking. She moved into a small guest house on Julia's property, close enough to help with Michael, far enough to finally breathe. As weeks turned into months, Alexander visited often, for Michael, yes, but also for Grace. Not out of obligation, but out of gratitude, respect, connection, healing. One evening at sunset, as they watched Michael toddle across the grass, laughing freely for the first time, Alexander spoke quietly. Grace, you saved his life. A pause. You saved mine too. Grace felt warmth bloom in her chest. She turned to him. And you saved me. They didn't say more. They didn't need to. Michael's laughter filled the air. Grace felt safe. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. She wasn't bracing for a command or preparing for punishment. She was home, with people who valued her, with a child who adored her, with a father who respected her, and with a life finally free from fear.